morning everyone, welcome to our latest game. This is an opportunity for me to try out all my new Landwehr for the Prussians. We're playing the Battle of Hagelberg. So Girard's division, which was the Magdeburg garrison, which was mainly composed of second line French forces and some Confederation of the Rhine forces, is on the way to link up with Marshal Oudinot in the direction of Gross-Beeren. However, covering this sector was General Hirschfeld in command of the newly raised Prussian Landwehr forces, and they were just at the point of launching their part in the German War of Liberation, throwing off the French yoke inspired in 1813. So the objectives for the French are to hold the village of Hagelberg, and for the Prussians it's to capture the village and hold it for the rest of the game. So the Prussians have some reinforcements to come on, but they start the game with 3 brigades. A small brigade here of Landwehr with some Landwehr lancers, supported by a brigade of reservists and another brigade of Landwehr in the Birken Woods, which is parkland over there on the left, so you can move through it unhindered. And we've got some more dense cover here on the right. All right, that's it. Let's kick off. Prussians only start with 3 brigades on the table and 1 as off-table reserves. The French have 3 brigades on the table. We'll roll for ADCs and then start the game. Cheers everyone. Okay, we've rolled up for ADCs. We only got 1 ADC on both sides, and we both deployed it on our, well, the French deployed it on their right hand flank because they want to be able to utilise their artillery battery, and at long range you can only fire in your arc of fire straight ahead. Whereas for the Prussians, they deployed it on their right-hand brigade over in the parkland as they wanted to get their flanking manoeuvre underway. So we've both got 1 hesitant brigade. Indeed, unfortunately, despite the rerolls, that Prussian brigade is hesitant, as is the French left-hand brigade. So left-hand wing isn't moving very much, but all other units are active. Let's roll for initiative. So the French and the Prussians are both on -1, so this will be a straight roll-off. And the French get a 7, Prussians get an 8. Prussians will move first. Okay, at the end of turn 1 movement, the Italian conscripts have formed themselves into line. They're aware there's some threat from Prussian approaching forces in these woods, even though they can't see them yet. The Prussian battery remains unmoved, and the brigade here has brought its reinforcing battalions up to the edge of the village. Otherwise, the battalions in the village and that one on the right-hand side, which is outside the village but just behind that light cover, are ready to face off against the Prussians. On the left, nothing moved for the French, and the French cavalry have also moved forward to threaten the Prussians, try and slow the Prussian advance down, knowing that the Prussian skirmishers can't fire at them while they're in the open. For the Prussians, their reserve brigade has moved forward here. Yeah, they've moved up, and they're supported by their Landwehr regiment also in line. We'll crack on with some firing. I think it'll probably just be exchange of skirmisher shots. I'll be back as we start turn 2, and perhaps with the French artillery. So we are going to see a volley from this Prussian Landwehr battalion. It'll be an inferior volley because they've moved, but because they're Landwehr, they'll be firing an inferior volley anyway, so they might as well. Let's see how they do. They do a 3, so they'll lose fire discipline, so no other effect from that. Otherwise, the Prussian skirmishers caused a casualty against the French skirmish screen and a couple of casualties against the battalion in the village. The French will now return. Okay, so we'll fire the French in the village. They will be firing a standard volley against the skirmish screen, so it'll be at -2. They're on 11. That's pretty good. Let's just check. Infantry firing against skirmishers is -2, so 11 becomes a 9. Standard volley is 3 casualties on the skirmishers and a discipline test. All right, it's interesting. So we'll now need to roll up for the Landwehr skirmishers because they are eager. So that means that on a 1, 2, 3 they test as conscripts. On a 4, 5 or 6 they test as veterans. Okay, so they're testing as conscripts. So this will be leadership test at -1. A 9 for conscripts will be a pass. So they stay there, but they do lose. Finally, this French artillery battery will fire at long range against the Landwehr cavalry. Well, not another bad roll. An 8 at long range is 1 casualty on the Landwehr cavalry. We'll mark that up, and then we'll get on with turn 3. Turn 2. Okay, turn 2 and a reversal for French. So for the French, their left wing has gone active, and unfortunately their right-hand brigade has gone hesitant. Unfortunately for the Prussians, we've got 2 ADCs, so we decided to try and get infantry assault on our reservist brigade. They weren't hesitant, as did their land colleagues supporting them, but the regiment in the woods is active. So the French are at -1, the Prussians are at -2, and the French gain initiative as it's a draw. Okay, in turn 2, the French left-hand brigade has started to deploy, looking to form a defensive flank here. So we've just moved the 2 battalions up to the edge of the woods, which go up along the other side of that road, and they'll be deploying into line shortly. The 3rd battalion was already in position to do support. The Prussians have moved forward successfully in the woods, and there will be some skirmish fire. In the centre here, the Hussars charged up towards the Prussian skirmishers, but they fell back, successfully passing their leadership test. And the other 2 Prussian battalions have formed squares. The Hussars didn't want to charge in against the column, as this is our only cavalry we'd rather pin, rather than damage ourselves fruitlessly charging into columns. Meanwhile, the French are pushing forward to try and capture this hill in the centre, hopefully. Yeah, you can see the front 2 battalions are now on the top of the hill. I want to wrestle that from the Prussians so we can deploy our 2nd artillery battery, hopefully up on this hill, and form a good defensive bastion. Otherwise, the Prussians have moved their Landwehr cavalry across to the left a bit to get them out of the arc of fire of the French artillery battery. They've moved their skirmish screen to the left so it can threaten the guns in due course and allow both Landwehr battalions to fire this turn. Alright, that's it for movement in turn 2. We'll now move on to fire. First to fire will be the French battalion in the village going against the Landwehr. I will check that's 9 inches, but assuming it is, reroll a 10. That's a pretty good roll. This will be a standard volley. On a 10 is 4 casualties against the Landwehr and a discipline test. We'll just check. They were indeed just in range, so that's 4 casualties. So let's see, does this brigade feel like veterans this turn? It does. That's a 6. We play for whole side up. Okay, so they've got a +1 veteran bonus. They pass that discipline test. They need a 7, -1 for 4 casualties, +4, +1 for being veterans this turn. So the Landwehr stand. All right, we'll now fire a volley from the garrison against the 2nd Landwehr battalion, needing 5s or 6s. They cause no casualties. All right, we'll then fire our skirmishers. We'll need to check the range again, but they will have a fire against the reservist battalion there. Only 4 bases can fire, so that'll be 3 shots. We cause 1 casualty if we're in 12-inch range. Which indeed we were, and that's the end of French firing for the turn. Okay, so we'll fire some Prussian skirmishers against this French infantry battalion. We cause no casualties. We will fire the Landwehr, so this will be an inferior volley against the village. So firing at a built-up area will be half casualties, and -1 for being in cover. So we roll a 5, that becomes a 4, half casualties will be nothing. Then we'll fire a volley with the other Landwehr battalion, another inferior volley. This will be at -1 because they're behind the fence. That's a 7 on an inferior volley is 1 casualty, -1 is 6. That's 1 casualty on the French. We go up to 3, and then the skirmish screen will fire at them as well. They've got 2 dice. I think it should have only been 1 dice, but that's no casualties. That's it for firing. That's the end of turn 2. On we go with turn. Okay, so good activations for the Prussians. All their brigades are active, and they actually got infantry assault because they had 2 ADCs off on their Landwehr brigade in the centre. For the French, the cavalry, unfortunately, have gone hesitant, but their infantry brigades are active. So this will be a test at -1 for the French. Okay, so the Prussians get 8, French get 7, French -1 goes down to 6. So the Prussians have initiative. Let's see if they do charge with their Landwehr this turn. Okay, so the Prussians have charged in. So we'll get defensive volleys from the French. So we'll do the right-hand one. This will be a standard volley. We get a 7. Now, just a reminder, the French battalions are actually all second rate, apart from the lights. And it is the 2 lights that are in the village. So the 2 lights do count as standard battalions all the way through. They're line infantry. So we rolled a 7. So a standard volley is 2 casualties on the Prussians as they come charging in. And then firing from the village, the garrison will fire theirs, and they get nothing. So nothing on the right, but 2 casualties on the left. So 2 casualties on the right, and none on the left-hand Prussian battalion. So when you're charging built-up areas, you charge straight in with no charge result, and we'll be on to hand-to-hand combat for that left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, as we're charging the field enclosure, there is a charge result. So the Prussians have got 6 casualties already, so that's -1, and they took 2 casualties in the charge, that's -2. Let's see what morale grade they count as. They do count as veterans for this, so that's at -2, but veterans take that down to a -1. Alright, I'll just check the French modifiers, but I don't think there will be any. Okay, it's not even -1 because the Prussians did attach their general to this one. The French have chosen to attach their general to the built-up area. The Prussians chose to use their reinforcements to support the assault on the built-up area. Okay, so this will be a straight roll-off as we try and go in the village. The Prussians get a 9, the French get a 5, so the Prussians win by 4. So on 4 charge results, the Prussians take the enclosure, and the defenders retreat with 1d3 casualties. All right, we'll do the French retreat. See how many casualties they get. They get 2 more casualties. So over on the right-hand flank for the French, the Italian conscripts still continue to hold that flank. The Prussian skirmishers have moved up to threaten the French artillery battery. The French are poised with this reserve regiment to potentially counterattack and try and take the enclosure off the Landwehr, who've occupied it this turn. We'll have the hand-to-hand combat to work out in the village. On the right, on the centre rather, we got some complex manoeuvring. The French took advantage of the presence of the Hussars and the fact that that would to some extent pin the Prussians, so they've moved 2 battalions forward in an attacking position. The Prussians themselves have formed line to try and hold off an attacking column secured on the flanks of their own column, so they've both come out of square. That's a bit dicey, but they didn't feel they had any choice. Being struck in column while you're in square, by a column while you're in square, is not good, and they've thrown their skirmishers out to put some pressure on that left-hand French column. They've moved the skirmishers up here too, and have also moved this brigade up to try and pressure this strong or strengthening position in the centre. This feels like a key combat going on in the game. Again, we have an opportunity potentially by the French to outflank this Prussian move if they choose to, as we move towards turn 4. So first we'll do shooting, and then we'll come on to hand-to-hand combat in turn 3. So the French have been subject to fire by the Prussian skirmishers. They did nothing. The other units have all been in combat or charges, so can't fire this turn. So now the Prussian reservists here will try an inferior volley against their French column. They may well get a combat dice as they're at close range against a column. I will just no combat dice because they're not within 3 inches and they're not massed. The cavalry does not create a massing effect with the columns despite being in close proximity to those infantry units. So let's see the inferior volley. That was nearly very good, but that's still an 8. That's not bad for an inferior volley. That's 2 casualties on the French column. And then we'll fire the other Prussians who moved from square. So this will all be an inferior volley, half effect. 6, that'll be nothing against the French cavalry. And then we'll fire the Prussian skirmishers against the other French column. And they cause no casualties. So before I forget, I'll mark those 2 casualties up on the front. As we swing across, we'll do another inferior volley by my Prussian Landwehr column against the flank of the French on the hill. We roll a 6, that'll be nothing. Then French skirmishers will be subject to fire by that Prussian skirmish screen down there. 10, that's 1 casualty on the French. Otherwise, that's no effect. We should take them on to 2. I'll just put the camera down to fix that because it says 11 actually, not 1. Okay, so the French return fire by their skirmishers first. That's 1 casualty on the Prussians. The French column will fire an inferior volley at half effect against the skirmish screen. No, they lose fire discipline. French column on the right will fire 10. So 10 will be on an inferior volley, 3 casualties in a discipline test. So half casualties is 1 casualty against the Prussians, but a discipline test. These are reservists, so I think they've only got 1 casualty so far, so this will be a normal test. A 9. They are fine, but I'm not the casualty. Finally, our guns will fire canister at the skirmishers. That's a 7. -2 is down to a 5. At close range is 1 casualty against that skirmisher screen. Okay, so we'll now fight the combat in the village. So the Prussians start with 5 dice. We'll need to check whether they count as veterans. They don't this time. They are fighting as conscripts. So they are 1 morale level lower than the French, so they lose a dice. And they're attacking a built-up area, so they lose a dice. Let's just have a look. They only have 2 casualties and the French have none. So the French, I don't know why they attach their general, because you don't get a benefit from attaching a general to combat unless you attach a glory result. So that was a bit fruitless. I should have put them into the other combat. But let's roll the result. All right, 3 casualties for the Prussians. That's pretty good. Sorry, yes, 3 casualties for the Prussians. Oh my God, they've captured the village. Or have they only won by 1? It looks like they've only won by 1. The French have done 2 casualties. Let's mark that up. Okay, so this is a pretty crucial combat. The Prussians are winning the combat, but they have now taken 4 casualties. So their Landwehr battalion will be down to 4 dice, and the reinforcing battalion, if they choose to throw it in, will be on 5. Let's roll for the morale level. So the one fighting in the village remains as conscripts, and the reinforcing battalion counts as veteran. All right, so this is a bit complicated. So the one fighting in the village gets 5 dice. It loses 1 for 4 casualties. It's down to 4, and it's 1 morale grade below the French in the village, who are line. So they get 3. The second battalion gets 5 dice, counts as veteran, so it's 1 morale grade better, so it gets 6 dice. So I think the Prussians should get 9. The French fighting in the village get 5, and the reinforcing battalion is second rate, but has suffered no casualties, so it's going to be 9 against 5. Let's see how we do. French will roll first for their 2 battalions fighting in the village. Not very good. Looks like the French might be about to lose the village. They cause 3 casualties. How do the Prussian Landwehr do? Well, that I can see is immediately better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 casualties by the Landwehr. So assuming I've got that right, the Landwehr win by 2 for a second round, and the losers retreat. And this will be a break test for this French brigade. So this is tough news for the French. We've now got Landwehr in the village, and obviously for the Prussians, we charged in the supporting unit, so that's in there with only 1 casualty, so that helps our holding of the village. Now let's roll the risk to general test for Charlie's general. He's fine. So that's it. That's the end of turn 3. Let's move on with turn 4. Okay, some critical tests here. We have rolled 3 ADCs for the French, which is fortunate, and we're going to put 1 and a reroll on this faltering brigade. Let's do that on camera. We roll a 6. They obey orders. That's good. Okay, and then we'll put our reroll on our infantry brigade on the hill. They are active as well, and then our cavalry brigade is active. So all French brigades are active. For the Prussians, we'll have a think about it. We've got 3 ADCs to allocate. Okay, so we're going to do a re-rolls on all of our French brigades, and we will not give a re-roll dice to my brigades defending in the centre here. So on the left with a re-roll is active, my central brigade is active, my Landwehr in the village is active, and my newly arrived reserves of the Prussians are active. So again, everyone's active here. Let's roll for initiative. All brigades of both sides are active, so this will be a straight die roll off. French had didn't have the initiative last turn. Prussians retain the initiative and get to move first. So we've got some charges in the beginning of turn 4. This French infantry battalion has charged the Landwehr in the enclosure again. In the centre, this French infantry battalion has charged the reservists who are in line, and the French have been charged in the flank by the Landwehr battalion coming out of the woods. All right, let's do the charge defensive fire and the charge reaction. I didn't do it on camera because I didn't think much would come of it, but the defensive fire from the village has caused 3 casualties on that attacking French column. which doesn't bode well. And now we'll do the defensive fire from the Landwehr. This will be an inferior volley. They've taken 6 casualties, so it'll be an inferior volley at -1. That'll be a 4, that won't do anything. So the column has taken 3 casualties, but we'll move into charge range. Alright, now let's do the charge results for this column. Okay, so this will be a straight roll-off. No supports because the French don't have infantry assault, and I don't think I can support from the built-up area. So it'll be +3 for the Prussians. Not too bad for the French. They roll a 6. The Prussians roll a 4, but the Prussians get a +3, so that's a -1. So the attacker volleys. That'll be 1 combat dice, and they stand off. They roll a 1, so that's no effect, and the Prussians are driven to a halt by the defensive volley. Sorry, that should be the French, not the Prussians, who are driven to a halt by that defensive volley. Alright, so we've got another defensive volley over here. We will fire the Prussians on the French column as it approaches. They'll get a combat dice because they're firing, and they're regular troops firing at close range on an attacking column. Wow, this really is going for the Prussians today. That's a double 6, so nothing from the combat dice, but a double 6 on a standard volley is 5 casualties and a discipline test, which takes this battalion up to 7 casualties. So fortunate that it's not in the -2 bracket, but they will have to take a discipline test at -1. They are reservists, so this will be at -2. 1 for the conscript status now, and so they go unformed. That will not help their charge. So this will be a charge result at -5. So the Prussians get an 8, the French only get a 2, so it's lose by 5. Attacker retires and takes 1 casualty. Okay, so the charge here, again, it'll simply be -4 to the French for being charged in the flank. So the French go down to 3, Prussians get a 5, so they will win by 2. They will melee with the Lan, and the French will melee unformed. Okay, movement completed on turn 4, and the Prussian Landwehr started deploying into line to face off against this French regiment at the edge of the woods. In the centre, we've still got that hand-to-hand combat to resolve. However, the French have redeployed here, so they've pulled and they've stepped back with their French hussars, and they've unmasked their guns, which also deployed this turn. So potentially some serious damage to do there on the Prussian forces facing off against it, but the guns will be exposed by fire from the village over here. And over on the right, we can see that the Prussian, first of the Prussian reserves have arrived. So we've got another Landwehr regiment closing in against the right flank of the French position. It's not looking good for the French at the moment. Let's see what they can do to pull Iran out of the fire. We'll do firing in this turn. As things are desperate, we are going to open fire with this battery as it unlimbered this turn. So let's do this. This will be at effective range, and we roll a 10. That's pretty good. It's going to be -2 because they've moved in this turn. So that takes that down to an 8. At effective range is 2 casualties, and we'll roll some bounce through against that supporting battalion, and we get 1 more casualty on the supporting battalion. French artillery on the left. The French skirmish screen will open up. The right, we'll need to check. I think I only get 4 dice for 6 men, so we'll do 2 on the right-hand battalion, which does nothing, and 2 on the left-hand battalion, which does nothing. So no casualties from the French skirmish screen. And then the French guns here will fire against the right-hand emerging battalion of the Landwehr that have just appeared on table. This is at effective range. Let's see how we do. Not very well. 4 will be no effect at effective range. All right, that's the end of firing, and God, so it's a close run battle here for the French. Let's do the hand-to-hand combat, and that'll be the end of turn 4. Now checking the morale grade of the skirmishers. These still count, as the Landwehr, these ones still count as veterans, so that'll be good. So for them, so they start with 5 dice, and they gain a dice for being veterans, fighting against the French, who will lose dice, I'm sure, for being charged. Yeah, and of course the Landwehr had a Lan as well, so this will not go well for the French. They cause 2 casualties on the Landwehr, and the Landwehr surprisingly, only cause 2 casualties in return. So that's the French get to decide, the defender gets to decide whether to fight on. Given that that was 7 dice versus 3, and we've had a fairly miraculous result and held ourselves together against that charge from the landwehr in the flank, we are going to retire with that French battalion. So we'll do that, and the landwehr take the hill, or that part of the hill. So a lot's happened in the first 4 turns of this game. So we have the landwehr advancing through the parkland in a standoff here with the far left flank of the French position. In the centre, the French have been thrown back. They've taken reasonably heavy casualties. They haven't been able to fully occupy the hill, but they do have their artillery battery up there and 1 full-strength infantry battalion with some supports, and that doesn't necessarily bode well for the Prussian reservists who are facing off against that artillery battery. So what will the Prussians do there? In the centre, the Prussians now firmly hold the village with their battalion regiment of landwehr. But we do have a complete French brigade down here of 5 battalions, although again they've taken a number of casualties. We'll see whether they can throw the Prussians back out of the village. And on the right, well, things just don't look good for the French on the right, but let's hope they can just slowly retire in the face of that Prussian threat and push in the centre. Right, that's it for turn 4. We'll move on to turn 5. Okay, turn 5. The French have initiative. All their brigades have gone active, apart from this left-hand brigade, which is hesitant. But the one on the right and the cavalry are active. For the Prussians, everything is active, and the infantry brigade on their right flank has got infantry assault off. So French have initiative, and let's crack on with charges and movement into it. Okay, so on the far right flank, the charge move has been ordered by this Prussian landwehr regiment, and the Prussians charged the French skirmishers who were able to execute their discipline test. They fired and then pulled back behind the French infantry, but has boosted the Prussians forward on the table. In the centre here, the French are having another go. They'll bring up some units in support in the normal movement phase, but they have charged with infantry assault. Going off here, I need to move this central battalion forward. They've charged with infantry assault both into the field and into the village. And then we've charged the French hussars into this reserve regiment. They will need to take a test to try and form square. They're far enough away that they can. And over here on the left flank, the Prussians decided not to charge, as the French will be able to bring in supports, because defenders always can pull in their supports, always have to pull in their supports to any particular combat. So let's go on with charge resolution. We'll start here in the village. Given the village is the objective rather than the field, we're going to throw our support into the assault on the village. So the French battalion attacking the field will be unsupported. All right, let's just check the modifiers and then we'll roll. Okay, so we'll do an inferior volley for defensive fire for the Prussians. This will be firing at a column, so they do get a casualty dice. They roll a 4, that'll be nothing, but they do cause 1 casualty from the casualty dice, which will take the French battalion up to 4, so that will be a modifier for them. All right, and then let's do the charge results. So I have rolled, and again, the Prussians are going to be counting as veterans, so they will be on +1, and unfortunately the French will now be recruits as they've taken 4 casualties, so that will be +2 to the French, and then +3 to the Prussians, and +3 because the French infantry battalion has taken 4 casualties, although the Prussians have taken 6, so it'll only be a net +2 to the French. All right, let's roll. See how the French do. French get a 5, Prussians get a 6. That's a -3. So the defender retires and takes 1 casualty. So the Prussians hang on to the field. Okay, so now let's try and form square with our reservists. So the French were more than 15 inches away. So this will be a 7 or more. A 9, they form square. They should repel the French. Right, let's roll. This should be +2 for the Prussians. Yep, indeed. They get a 7. That goes to a 9. And on a +2, That's a win by 5, so a test of -5. The cavalry versus infantry and square. Cavalry take 1 casualty, and the square takes 1 casualty, and the cavalry retire. Okay, doing the firing for turn 5. Skirmisher fire has been reasonably ineffective. French artillery battery now will open up, firing off against this Prussian column. They're in square, rather, so that's a 7 and 2 extra casualties. So at effective range, 7 is 1, so that's 3 casualties on that Prussian column. Slightly, our Italian conscripts get to open fire. This is a large battalion. They roll, not badly, they roll a 7. That'll just be 1 casualty for an inferior volley. Yeah, so 1 casualty against the advancing Prussians. Okay, and in the final action of the turn, the French will assault the village, and they do have a supporting battalion if that needs to get involved. The French have taken no casualties. The Prussians have taken only 1. So the Prussians get 5 dice. The French get 5 to start with, 4 for assaulting a built-up area. Let's roll for the morale for the Prussians. They are only conscripts this time, so they're not feeling as brave. So they are now 1 morale grade below the French. So they go down to 4. So that'll be 4 each. Let's see how this combat goes. All right, so the French do 2 casualties and the Prussians do 2 casualties. Both can elect to fight on. Okay, second round of combat. So the Prussians will still be as raw recruits, so that'll be 4. And the French will get an extra dice because they're not supporting and assaulting a built-up area. Their supporting battalion is fully intact. The Prussian supporting battalion is not. So we'll do the supporting battalion separately. So for the first round of combat, Prussians do 2, French do 2. So that's 2 each. Okay, and then we'll roll for the second round. Prussians should get 5, and French should get 5. Prussians get 4 again. Okay, Prussians do another 2. French only do 1. So the Prussians win the combat and hold the village. Okay, so the command phase is now starting to go heavily in line in favour of the Prussians, and I expect that to carry on. They've now got no less than 6 brigades on table, which gives them plenty of ADCs to give them flexibility. And actually all 6 ADCs came off. So we've given a forwards order to this flanking brigade that's just appeared on the far right-hand flank of the Prussian position. So that'll get 46 of bonus movement. Otherwise, all Prussian brigades are active. Both the left-hand French brigades are hesitant, and they had to do a falter test for failing to capture the village this time. So we've got a re-roll on it, and we roll a 3. Now let's have a look at the strength of this brigade. 4, 6, 5, 5. So this brigade is now conscript. So a 3 is a retire result. So let's try the re-roll. And it's a 2. It's a retire result as well. So this is it. I think we call it there. The French have to retire off table, and the Prussians are victorious. All right. We'll just do a couple of closing shots of the game, and then I'll do a summing up. Okay, so that was a really interesting game, playing on a nice wide table, which meant despite their lots of units, we still do have open flanks on both sides, as the French couldn't simply line the table edge, and we didn't. So that brought an interesting element to the game, I think. The French are still doing reasonably well on this left flank, so this left-hand regiment was never really engaged, but it was just being pinned by this Prussian Landwehr battalion, and the Prussian attack was just about to go in as they try and flank the left-hand end of the French line. Now all the French reserves have been pretty much committed. In the centre, the Prussian Reserve Regiment survived being charged by the French Hussars. Hasn't really taken too much artillery fire, so all these Prussian units are in pretty good health. A few casualties on the reservists in the centre. The remarkable bit of it, as always, seems to be the performance of the Landwehr. So this standard Landwehr brigade rolled really well on its discipline tests and managed to get its veteran status. The war for the liberation gripped them, and they were early on in the game able to throw the French out of the village, and there were good few attempts by the French to fight their way back in, but none of them ever succeeded. And here on the French right flank, things are looking pretty dire. Next turn, that conscript battalion of Italians is going to be charged by a whole Prussian regiment, and I think this flank starts going soon thereafter. So, and this French brigade, which was the strongest one, it had the 2 regular units in as well as the second liners. 5, 5, 6, 4, 3 casualties. So again, not massive casualties in this game, but the retire results forcing them back, and the increasing number of Prussian forces means the village looks pretty untakeable, especially as the Prussians have now got an artillery battery on the table, and I can't see the French redeploying enough troops from the sort of left centre to fight their way back into the village without exposing themselves to a strong Prussian counter-attack. So I'll see you all next time, and I hope you've enjoyed this game.